morning everyone, and welcome to the final episode of the Smiling PhD Advent Calendar. Since this is the last episode, I thought a good topic would be finding an end to whatever it is you're doing at the moment. That can be a smaller task, just setting it aside and then going into your holidays, or that can be something as big as finishing your thesis. Finding an end sometimes isn't easy. We're used to having deadlines that tell us, okay, you're going to finish now, and you try and finish as good as possible in the time you have left. But what if the end is a bit more open? And within the 3 or 4 years of a PhD, there are so many things that you need to finish, but there's not really a deadline. And then you need to finish this experiment, you want to finish that chapter, you maybe want to finish your literature review. Maybe it's just something like, I want to finish reading these 5 articles because I think they're really useful. But reading an article can sometimes take a while. So I thought a bit more about why do we not stop doing things? And I think maybe a good way of judging this is saying stop when it's good enough. And that sounds super simple, but it's not. The problem is, what is good enough? You will never get perfect, probably, especially if you're looking at your thesis. I mean, it's a topic that you could probably dive into deeper and deeper and deeper and understand it even better and better and better. But this is a lifelong project. I mean, how many professors started off with a PhD and then kept digging and digging and digging and still want to know more? And 30 years down the line, they know so much more about the whole topic, yet there are still things that they don't know and still things that they could find out. So you will never finish that journey. Just accept that. So you need to find an end point for yourself where you say, okay, this is as far as I can go in my PhD, or this is as far as I can go in my literature review, or in this chapter, in this part of the experiments. And if I want to go deeper, then that's a next chapter, or that's a postdoc, or whatever. It is the next step, so we need to try and frame what we can talk about. And that is super difficult, because it is vague. So I thought a bit about reasons why we don't want to finish, because I feel sometimes it's more holding on to something because you at least have this project, this PhD or this chapter, and then you don't have to go to the next step and think about that, because that can be scary sometimes. It's either a topic that you haven't thought about yet, so it's a huge pile of work that's looming somewhere in the distance, and as long as you're still busy with this project, you don't really have to think about that one. Or it's something as daunting as, what comes after the PhD? I need to look for jobs. What kind of job do I want? That's a life decision. My God, I'm not going to take that. I'd rather work on my PhD. I'm sure there's something that I could make a bit better here. So that can be a worry. Like the big thing looming in the distance, and that's something why you don't want to move on and rather stick with what you know. Another thing could be that there's nothing in the distance, so you don't know. There are some wishes, there's some bubble ideas floating around, but there's nothing tangible, so there's a bit of fear of the void. Like, what am I going to do after this? Like, I'm dedicating so much time at the moment to the PhD. What's going to happen when all that is gone? That's a massive hole suddenly. And sometimes you might feel, I don't really want to go there. I might as well just keep working along on my thesis, write this, write that. Maybe even run a couple more experiments just to make it a bit nicer, and just to not have to think about the void in the end. The reason is kind of the same. It's like the fear of what's coming. But there can be another reason, and this ties in with the episode about the imposter syndrome, trust yourself. The problem to define what is good enough. Sometimes we just don't trust ourselves that what we produced is good enough to pass the exam, pass the Viva even. Looking at your whole PhD thinking, is this really good enough to be a PhD in the end? How do I know that? Who am I to decide that? Well, in the end it's not you deciding that, for first of all. And if you have a good supervisor, they won't let you submit if they don't think this is fit for passing your Viva. But you need also some adjustment for yourself, some guidelines. And usually there are guidelines out there. Let's look at the whole PhD thesis. Your university has published some guidelines or rules, what needs to be in a thesis in order for you to be granted a PhD. So look at that. Go through it step by step and make a list for yourself. What do I need to cover? And that will be vague, because obviously they need to make rules that apply to all PhDs that they are handing out. Okay, so there's something like you need to provide some novelty to the knowledge of the scientific community. Well, what is novel? Like, where does that start? Where does it end? That's a bit hard to grasp. But if you need some help with defining things like that, making it more tangible, making it better fitting for your subject, go and talk to your supervisor. They are supposed to know that. And like that, go through every single point that your university requests to grant you the title of a PhD. And then you basically have your framework. That's what you need to cover. And then you go through your thesis and think, did I cover that? And tick the box, or make a question mark, or make an X where you say, I don't really think I have that. And then you go back and where the question marks are, you try and make it a bit more clear. And when you have an X, you obviously have to talk about that, because I'm relatively sure you have it. So basically, don't overdo it. If you've ticked the box already, you don't need to tick it 20 times, you know? The part of the novelty, for example. If you have novelty in there, that's great, box ticked, next. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to win a Nobel Prize with this. This just needs to add one novelty to what the scientific community knows already. And obviously, it's great if you've got more than that. And maybe you have. But if you haven't, what's the problem? What do you actually want to achieve? You want a PhD. In the UK, we don't even get grades on our PhD. We get passed or failed. So if you are in good contact with your supervisor, or if you have some tutors maybe that can help you figuring out if you've ticked this or that box, all you need to find is, did I tick that or did I not tick that? You don't need to go for excellence, really. Sometimes it's okay to just pass, because in your degree, in the certificate you get in the end, nobody will see how much more work you put into this, okay? I mean, obviously, when you want to keep working with the same people, you need to put some effort in throughout the 3 years, but I'm sure you will have already. So, if you've done that, the last 2-3 months that you might want to put in extra work, does that really tip the balance? Are you certain? And if you haven't really worked for 3 years, the last 3 months won't kick it. Sorry. So this is a long-term effort that you need to make. And if you've made that, I'm certain you have enough to write about. You just need to get your head around the whole thing that you have there. And just to be clear, I'm not advocating handing in your thesis without the consent of your supervisor. I don't think that's generally a good idea. But if you don't get enough support from your supervisor in making these decisions, try and find somebody else that you trust, has enough experience to judge that, and decide it with them. Also, you can sometimes nudge your supervisor a bit. So, I mean, PhD students are the data producing machines of every lab. So, some supervisors like to push their PhD students to produce a bit more, maybe get a better paper out of it. And if that's what you want, that's totally fine. But be aware that their intentions may be different to your intentions. Maybe for you it's not as important to gain this extra data to publish in a higher ranked journal. Make that clear. Make that first clear for yourself, and here it's important to be honest to yourself. And then make it clear to your supervisor as well that this is beyond the scope that you have or want, and that you're not going to do it. You can say that. If your supervisor is not supportive enough in finding definitions as in what is good enough, you can go and ask directly this question. You can go and say, you know, I found this and this and this. Is any of this novel enough to get a PhD granted? That's a very clear question. And then they may say, yeah, it could be, there could be some more you can add. And then you can still take that answer, go to somebody else, talk to them about it, and figure out if you really need that additional data or work or like reading, whatever it is that's required. Or if you think, well, maybe that's additional data that they would like to see, but that's not actually required to get the PhD. And I'm not saying here just do the absolute lowest level that you can, because that's risky. That's if you just scratch the surface, there's a risk of going one step too low and then you fail, and that's what you don't want. But I don't know if that's the same in the UK, but we have a saying, a good horse doesn't jump higher than it needs to. If the bar is here, don't jump this high. Doesn't make sense, just waste of energy. If there are things that you still want to know, take them into a postdoc project. And that leads me back to what I said in the beginning. You don't have to do it all in your PhD, because it can become a lifelong project. Take the courage, hand it in. You can do it. And that's me saying it now, because I'm still a couple of months away from, from that point. I probably need to re-watch this video when I'm at the point to actually make me hand it in. But well, the videos will stay online, so you can go back to any episode that you would like to see later in a point of your PhD, or if you know somebody who just starts a PhD later on and you think, well, that might be useful to them, feel free to share this. And all that's left to say now is thank you. Thank you for staying with me for the whole month. Thank you for the lovely comments I got. I had people getting in touch that I haven't heard of for years before. That's a brilliant side effect of this. I have certainly learned a lot about myself and my beliefs, because I had to really formulate my ideas with these videos. I hope you take something away from this, and even though I don't see you tomorrow, keep on smiling and have a lovely Christmas.